The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another webinar with MLA's Profitability and Productivity series. Tonight we'll be looking at another carbon topic, and that'll close us out for the topic and for the series, unfortunately. So my name is Peter Haviland, and I work for the webinar coordinators Agri Consulting. Tonight we're looking at carbon planning with a focus on an approach that suits us for now and into the future. And we've got Jon Wright joining us for that to provide a producer perspective. Before we get into things, I'll quickly set you all up on our platform so you understand what's going on. So probably the most important feature there is that we use the orange arrow to minimise your toolbar, and that way you'll get maximum experience and be able to see all the slides fully. Tonight we're going to mix things up a little bit in our presentation. So I'm going to throw in a poll to start with and just sort of present a summary on what we've covered off in this topic today. The other things that I'm going to make you aware of is in your toolbar there, we've got handouts tonight. And basically, given the demand and queries I've been receiving on these topics, I've put all those links, further information in one file there for you. So feel free to click on that file at any time and download it, and then you'll have it there for your use in future. If you're watching the recording of this webinar, please contact me and I can send it through to you. So I'll keep moving, guys. What I wanted to firstly cover off is we have done a number of webinar sessions on this topic, and there's a lot of interest, but there's also a lot of uncertainty and hesitancy around this topic, and that's natural, being it's something completely new to everyone. I look back on our past webinars and sort of summarise things to set the tone for the evening. And even though we've had presenters present from different backgrounds and topics, there was actually a lot of common elements between our two presenters, Professor Richard Eckhart and Stephen Weidman. And they all come back to some basic principles. And first of all, you know, it's about knowing your baseline and where you sit in terms of your carbon footprint for your specific business. Now, I've got a lot of inquiries and questions that have come through where people want a fairly quick or short and sharp answer to, you know, practices or where they'll sit in terms of carbon credits or negatives in their business. Now, I liken that to us presenting a webinar on farm business performance or production, and then being able to answer someone's question based on an average figure. There is no such thing as an average farm. You need to know your baseline, so that means you need to go and get assistance to actually find out where you sit. When we know that baseline, it allows us then to think about, well, do we need to look at mitigation strategies? And I guess that's what we're going to focus heavily on tonight, the do now strategies. And I won't steal John's thunder there, but there's a number of different strategies that we can look at now into the future. I'm going to ask you about where you think your priorities lie there very shortly. And then the final step is, you know, once we know where we're at and how we're going to get efficiencies in terms of carbon out of our systems, we can engage in carbon trading or offsetting our position. Now, both Stephen and Richard have been really clear on this. It's not your standard independent advice here. There are people out there with claiming to be experts in this area, and you need to be aware of the snake oil service provider. The other key thing that they've stressed is we shouldn't be going out and selling carbon as ag operations right now. given that this market and the science is still developing, we may need to access that carbon in the future, and that particularly applies for soil carbon. So again, this is a new area. We're not familiar with it, both producers and service providers. We need to take appropriate care and look at this not as a knee-jerk reaction. There's a significant cost and risk here, potentially, for you and your business. So just quickly, we're going to have a quick poll come up on your screen. And what I'd like you to do is answer those questions there for me right now. What do you think is the current most significant approach for you and your business to minimise your carbon footprint? And I'll keep this open for about another 30 seconds. We've got a wide array of responses coming in here, which we expected. That's good. All right. And as I said, this is just a snapshot, so I'm going to close that out. And hopefully that will come up on your screen now. So what's interesting there is, again, we have been listening to the previous webinars that everyone's sort of focused on the now and improving productivity. That's their focus, and that seems to be the sound approach and the advice from subject matter experts here. Not surprisingly, 23% don't have a strategy here right now, and that's fine. Interesting, we've still got planting trees and improving soil carbon, and that's fine as well. But we should look at that as not necessarily about purely focused on carbon, but how it complements our system. And very little have said technology at this point in time, so solar and electric. So I guess that kind of sets our time for tonight. I'm going to hide the results. We'll get back into the presentation. And, basically it has everyone in the audience probably where we expect them to be at this point in time. So the other things that weren't always that clear, and I apologise, I blocked a bit of the title header there. So who's actually doing stuff in this space right now? And there is the odd producer doing it at an individual level, but it's highly specialised and a niche product, and probably not relevant to 99% of producers out there. But there are Australian meat companies and consumer-focused companies that have gone out and marketed product. And here's a couple of prominent ones. So this is not a definitive list. We've got Greenhams, who are not marketing, but are helping Flinders & Co. provide a carbon neutral product. NAPCO have also gone with 5 Founders, which is a carbon neutral product. And Coles also have a certified carbon neutral product. That one's interesting. So it's based on Victoria Beef purchasing Australian carbon credit units from out of southwest Queensland. Now, the important thing I want to flag with you all tonight is that no one here is saying that their beef production system is carbon neutral, or that their processing and their whole supply chain is carbon neutral. They are able to provide this product because they have offset their carbon by a credit scheme. And that's, again, debated, and people are pulling that down, saying it should be carbon neutral, but the market is the market. And the other thing I want to really flag with you guys in terms of risk is Coles have gone out there, have gone through the right process, and all these businesses have, and then have received some criticism and bad press in the media about the type of carbon credit they've used. So I think that highlights that even though by the regulation, coals have done everything and have gone with an accredited scheme, perception can be damaging out there. So watch this space, see how it evolves. The other thing I would like to flag with everyone is that these businesses, if they're not in carbon neutral beef, they've got the eye on the future. So obviously we've got some significant players here out of the West or on the East Coast, and they all have a different approach to carbon neutral or carbon reduction. So again, the devil's in the detail with their programs and their deadlines, but at some point all of you will provide beef or lamb or product down a supply, up to a supply chain. So this is coming, and if businesses haven't flagged their direction now, then it's coming very shortly. Finally, as I said, email and phone has been going off the hook on these topics, and I've, shared resources. Again, everything tonight is in that handout, so please access it. And that key take home is seek reputable, qualified businesses in this space, and it should align with other advice that you get with your usual service providers. So again, this is not knee-jerk. We should be aware of those who are advocating just a product or a system or drastic changes to what you're doing without full explanation of the financial implications for your business. So that's probably enough from me. The final point there is, it's been mentioned in past events, but right now MLA has invested in essentially a program that allows you to go and create a carbon accounting scheme for your business. Now, again, it's not for the faint-hearted. You need to have a good handle on your farm business data and know your way around an Excel spreadsheet, but there are plenty of resources and tools there. So the top link will get you onto the landing page, then we navigate across to the tools, we download the program, as I said, which is in Excel, and the technical manual, I think, is 68 pages. So again, not for the faint-hearted. All right, so that's enough for me on the topic. As I said, there's plenty of information available from you from both MLA and other independent service providers. If you've got questions, you're going to need that individual assistance. Okay, so John, thanks for your patience there. I'm going to quickly get in and introduce you for tonight. So, as mentioned, we've got Jon Wright as the producer perspective tonight. John is the principal for Bluey Stud. They are based at Cooter Park near Woodstock in New South Wales. John's got an ag science background and out of uni worked with New South Wales DPI Training Research Centre for a number of years. So again, his focus there and his passion is around feed conversion in cattle, so optimising that wherever possible. And that's a bit of his ethos in how he runs his stud. So what's Cooter Bluey Park got to do with carbon? Well, I'll give you the link there, and it is feed efficiency and that focus. So anything we can do in our business that improves our productivity is gonna help us in terms of our carbon deficit footprint in the future. So sorry, John, I'm going to hand over to you now, John, and I'll go on mute.
Thanks, Pete. Just before you do, I'm not seeing any slides here. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for having me to talk to you tonight. We've got a fair bit to get through. And just before we start, I just want to clarify a few things in relation to why I'm here or what my purpose tonight is. I am a commercial producer and a seed stock producer. And so I'm going to be talking predominantly from a commercial producer's point of view, and just only a little bit from a seed stock producer's point of view. And they're very different approaches and different things that the business that involves a seed stock business needs to attend to compared to what a commercial producer is. I have to stay in my lane. So my world is cattle. For those out there who aren't in cattle or in sheep, it may be just not quite as applicable, but I hope you can stick with me. It's as much about an approach to a problem and an approach to a situation as it is about what we're actually talking. So yes, I will go on to the next slide there. We've got our bluey herd, which we started 25 years ago. It's a composite herd. We just started with Shorthorn and Angus, creating a 50-50 cross. Just going back one. A 50-50 cross, and created a line. The difference was that we built a facility on our farm and started testing for feed efficiency. So that's just recording how much the young bulls eat each day for a 70-day period. At the end of that period, we get total amount of feed consumed, and then we're weighing the animal, so we then get total amount of weight put on and get a feed conversion figure. We don't need to get any more complicated in it than that, even though it can get quite involved from a seed stock producer's point of view. But basically, the principle that we knew was that feed efficiency was a heritable trait. We knew that feed efficiency existed within the population of cattle in a huge range. So there was 10-to-1 converters and there was 5-to-1 converters, even more extreme than that. So we knew that there was a variation in the population, and we knew it was a trait we could select for. It's about as heritable as growth. So there's real room to move the average in individual herds via genetics. So that's 25 years ago we started, and we've been testing ever since. We've now tested only like 1,500 bulls over those years. The picture you see in front of us is over 4 years ago, we purchased an automated feeding system. So prior to that, we were doing it all manually, had 48 individual pens and weighed the feed in and out of those pens every day. Thank God this technology came along. It's stuff we imported from Canada, and enables us to, the animals are just eating out of those feed bunkers. Those feed bunkers are set on load cells, weighing them every second. The animals have transponders in their ears. It's recording which animal is there for the period of time that they're eating, and collates that information against that animal in total intakes for the day. We deal with none of that data. Those systems are automatically linked straight to Canada via the internet, and they deal with all the data. We just get a report back each day telling us who's eaten what, and if there's any anything that we should be looking at as far as individual animals that might have reduced intake. So it made a huge difference to our ability to collect the data and continue. We put up those domes over the top of the pens a couple of years ago. We were testing predominantly through the winter, and the mud in the pens was really making it quite difficult for us to feel comfortable about managing those animals in that space. It was really an animal welfare thing, and also, accuracy of data. We didn't want to be affecting the animals in how stressed they were or unhappy they were. We needed the animals to be expressing their full genetic potential. Right, we'll move on. So we were talking about our approach, and I want you to just look at that slide there. It's probably coming from a different angle than you may have heard from before, but as I say, as a seed stock producer and a commercial producer, I know that 90% of the emissions related to our product are happening on farm. So when we talk about solutions, they have to be solutions that are happening on farm. Now we can see 4 of them there. The 4th one is all about sequestration. I'm choosing to not talk about that. That is not my lane. We have been, I've done the Grazing for Profit school twice over the last 20 years. We've implemented all of that stuff, incredibly happy with the way it's impacted our production system and our management system. But again, you know, we're doing everything we can to sequester carbon and create biodiversity and retain rainfall and all those sort of things. But today we're not going to be talking about the sequestration side. We're going to be talking about ways of reducing emissions. And there's a variation of opinions about what we can achieve on that side and what real differences we can make. And we could probably get into those later on, but I just want to focus on the animal side and what we can achieve on farm with our cattle in reducing emissions. That's not to say that genetics is the most important, but they're 3 very big areas. So genetics, if we move on, going back, when we're talking about genetics, our approach in breeding cattle is all about the profitability of commercial producers. And these things here are very well understood as huge factors that are profit drivers to commercial profitability. Now, I have the mature cow size wouldn't normally be in there, but we're talking about carbon, and I have to put that one in there when we talk about carbon as factors that really have the ability to shift carbon output or methane output and also profitability. So obviously we've got feed efficiency, fertility is there. In the northern area, there's the ability to, in northern graziers, there's a lot more room to move. In the southern production systems, our fertility is fairly high, and so the ability to shift that and it be a profit driver is a little bit harder, but still needs to be there. But mature cows size is a really, really important one in this sense, and we'll talk about that as we go along a bit further. Now, mature cow size, don't worry about this diagram too much, but all it's telling you is the research has been done. The research was done 20 years ago in Australia, looking at what are the things that most affect the amount of methane our cattle produce. And one of the largest ones is how much they eat. And it's nearly a straight line. So the more the animals eat, the more methane they produce. What that's actually showing is the difference between dairy production, northern beef production, and southern beef production, as you can see underneath there. Don't worry about that too much, but just to understand that those dairy cows are eating an enormous amount of feed and hence producing an enormous amount of methane. In Australia, we don't have a large population of dairy cows relative to our beef cows. But anyway, that's just the driver of most of the conversation revolves around that line. It's saying whatever we do in our production systems to reduce intake will be directly reducing methane. And that's stuff that we can do on our farms straight away. It's not talked about a lot, but I think it's incredibly important. Moving on. So the genetic side we covered, as I say, I'm not going to go into what we have done and what our genetics are like and that sort of stuff. I don't think it's the time for that, other than to say that we've been able to shift feed efficiency and feed conversion ratio in our herd significantly over time. So not to talk about us, but we are a demonstration of herd of what can be achieved in any production herd if you select for feed efficiency, what it does to the intakes of your animals and hence the methane output. So I want you guys, people to think, seriously about the part that says any management technique that will reduce overall herd intake without reducing production will go towards reducing methane output. So it just sets us at a different angle than we maybe all traditionally have thought about this. We know those things about increasing production, increasing growth rate, and all of those things are very, very important. But we're looking at this from a different angle, saying whatever we can do in our production system that reduces intake and maintains production of the overall herd can have a significant effect on your overall methane output and your kilograms of CO2 equivalents per kilogram of product. That's the measure. I'm just going to give you a couple of quick, examples. The first one is a bit out there, but I think could potentially have, quite a large impact in commercial production. It's called the no cow herd. It's come out of America a long time ago, hasn't been talked about much. We're thinking about this in terms of methane. So the no cow herd is that you have all heifers. All those heifers are AI'd with sexed semen to produce a heifer calf. All those heifers give birth to their calf, wean their calf, and then those heifers are fattened and slaughtered. So they're still young females, still with young teeth, still going to get top dollar. But you then have the next crop of calves coming through. Sure, you're going to have to buy in a small percentage of females each year, but what it's taking out the cow part of your herd. So it's taking out that huge feed cost of your big cows, and it's just focusing on a herd system, a heifer system. So it's just interesting. It's a different way of looking at it. We talked a little bit earlier about mature cow size. So there's a couple of parts to mature cow size. One is the frame size of your animals. The other one is how fat your cows are. So there's two parts. We can shift the weight of our cows, one by accessing genetics that gives us smaller cows. And there's figures now and reliable figures starting to come through that you can use as in your selection indexes to choose your bulls. But what you can do at home is about fat cows. Now, this is a fairly contentious issue, but we do everything we can to stop our cows eating. We know that a cow will eat 2.5% of her body weight if you let her. She will maintain her body weight and her pregnancy on half that. I'm asking, why would you give her that second 50% if she doesn't need it? So if you're fattening your cow from the time that she weans the calf off her through to the time that she calves again, any more than shifting it about a half a condition score, I would suggest that's a waste of money, a waste of feed, and a creation of methane that you don't need to be creating. So there's a lot of discussion about the relationship between fat and fertility. We can't go into that now, but knowing that fertility is dominated by that month before joining, it doesn't matter how fat the cow is at that stage. It's at that stage all about a rising plane of nutrition. So a condition score 2 cow, 3 cow, 4 cow doesn't have any greater chance of getting in calf than a 4 compared to a 3 compared to a 2. We don't want condition score 1s in any production system. So again, that flows through that how we manage our cows, flows through into how we manage our heifers as well. There is producers out there that are joining 450 kilogram heifers. Again, an absolute waste of feed and a creation of methane that we don't need to be doing. This is real stuff that you can do straight away. How can you control the body condition score of your cattle? One thing we do understand by all the information that comes out of rotational grazing and time control grazing is that putting animals in large mobs, many would know that you will probably have a bit of a reduction in production, but it's about reducing the input costs that outweigh that. That high density grazing does create a manuring effect which stops the cows eating. So we see it all the time, putting large numbers of cows in small paddocks. The first day they get a gutful, the second day they walk around trying to look in between the manure and the urine. The third day they come to the gate and look at you and say, move me, and you say no, not for another day or two. They're soiling the grass, not eating it, and so they don't eat it, and you leave it there as ground cover and move them on. Some other interesting thoughts on reducing intakes could be one-way gates on water points. So the animals go out to graze in the morning, they come back for a drink and can't get back out for the rest of the day. We're reducing their intakes, so we're coming back towards more 7 kilograms rather than a 14 or 15 kilograms a day. That's a lot of feed over your herd, and it's actually a lot of methane over your herd. Maintenance stock following production stock. I'm sure a lot of you know about that. Again, what that does is reduce the intake of the following herd. You don't want them to have the good feed. You give that to the production stock, your maintenance stock, your pregnant females. Following those other stock is reducing their intake and extending your feed supply. Righto. The third thing, the first was genetics, the second is management, the third is diet. I don't need to spend too much. There's been so much talked about a lot of these feed additives that are now coming on the market, and they're really, really exciting and have a real potential in some areas of the industry to have a significant effect. At this stage, it's going to be only available to the dairy industry and the feedlot industry. We need to understand, as far as our beef production system is concerned, that only 3% of our total national herd are in feedlots for a third of the year. So when we talk about an 80% reduction in methane, that's fantastic if we can achieve that, and a great start. But we're only talking about it being fed to 3% of the animals for a third of the year. And so as a national approach to reducing our methane output, it's got a fair way to go till we can get those additives to the majority of cattle in our industry. There's a lot of research going on about different types of pastures that may be able to not only boost production, is what's traditionally talked about, but also different types of pastures that may have, you know, through the levels of tannin in those grasses to actually reduce the amount of methane that we're producing. Again, we need to reiterate that every time we reduce the amount of methane we're producing, we're increasing the profitability of our herds. We're increasing production. That's a loss out of the system. If we can not let it out of the system for all these different ways we're talking about, then it's going to increase our profitability. The third thing is, you know, which people are talking about now is can we get some of those feed additives into our grazing systems via blocks? Now, you know, there's a lot of advantages for blocks. Being able to record what amount of intake the animals are having and how effective that is doing it may be more difficult to achieve. Next slide. Again, the sequestration part. So much talk in this area, so many exciting things that we can hope will come to allow us to strip carbon out of the atmosphere and be held in the soil. The things that I think are concerning in this area is the actual fact that we have to hold that carbon in the soil for at least 100 years, or it's like we haven't held it at all. We have the advantage of shifting the carbon in our soil, but it also plateaus after a while. So the government will be able to add all our farms sequestration together to meet some targets. As individuals, we need to understand that the shift that we make in capturing carbon in our soils may only be short-lived. It's about the change. So if you've got a high level of carbon already, your ability to shift carbon and capture more may be limited. If you're in poor quality soils, it may be limited by the environment. So, but it's all about how much you change. And then it's all about what you've got in the bank and what you've got to pay for. And unfortunately, methane is considered something that we have to pay for. So we'll talk a little bit more about an approach to that later on. But yeah, it's not my area. It concerns me. It only concerns me because it's a distraction from what I think we need to be focusing on. And it's making people feel like we've got a solution when I'm not sure we do. So my approach is strongly coming from the need for the beef industry to take responsibility for the emissions that we are creating. And I know that sounds pretty harsh, that I'm only talking on this side, but what we do know is if we do both sides, as far as the sequestration side and the reduction in emissions, they will be both beneficial to our production systems. Just to focus on the sequestration side and forget about the other side, I think puts us in a difficult position in how we're going to communicate what we've done to consumers. So it's all right to say that we have a bit of a problem. We do that all the time in our own production systems. We hunt for the challenges that we have. We hunt for those things that may impede our success, and we take responsibility of all of those things to try and move forward and increase profitability or increase our the way we run our production systems. So fighting the problem, shooting the messenger, to me, is an energy that would be best focused on working on reducing emissions and creating a solution. It's all about our ability to communicate with consumers, how we are taking responsibility for the small bit that the beef industry is contributing to total emissions. Nobody in the world, nobody in Australia expects the beef industry to solve climate change. All they expect us to do is take responsibility for our small part. So you've seen that slide there. We'll keep moving on. I think one of the real things that we have to do when we talk about that conversation with consumers is to ensure that it is absolutely transparent, and the methodology that we use to outline the changes that we've made is clear and scientific. It has to be. This is not a problem that's going to be solved with marketing. This is a problem that's going to be solved with honest and true assessment of the changes we're making and then communicating those to our consumers. One of the things I'm also absolutely sure about is when we say that 90% for beef production, I'm talking here, 90% of the emissions are happening on farm. It's too much to ask the producers, commercial producers, to be taking responsibility for all of those emissions. And so we are constantly trying to say to the rest of the people in the chain after the commercial producers, which includes the seed stock industry, includes the processors, includes the meat companies. We are saying to all of those people, we strongly need a hand to help commercial producers reduce their emissions. We need clear market signals that will help farmers shift their production systems to producing a low emissions product. So I don't think that we as an industry will be able to charge more for a low emissions product. There are people who potentially are going to walk away from our product in droves if we don't communicate to them that we're taking this seriously and working out how we can take responsibility for our path. So we need those companies to start offering and helping us change our behaviour to produce a product that we put on the shelf for the same price. Because it's no way in people who are already walking away from your product potentially to say, here's the new product, but you've got to pay for it. We have a lot of competitors in the space. The obvious ones, I guess, is plant-based meats, is lab-grown meats. The other ones are absolutely real and true to us, which are lamb and pork and chicken. And their emissions per kilogram product is significantly less than ours in the beef industry. No one made that up, that's just science. And I think we need to accept that, think about it, and work out how is the consuming public going to behave in the future if climate change continues to get worse. Now, the easiest thing in this whole discussion is to say climate change is not real. Then you can just walk away from the whole discussion, and that makes it very easy for you. For us who believe it is real and it is getting worse, then the challenge is there for our beef industry. So again, I'm talking here about some approaches. As an industry, and I'm talking about the beef industry stands out completely from the rest of agriculture. The amount of emissions that we are producing on our farms is significantly greater than any other agricultural industry. The statistics show that. And that's the way we're perceived, whether we like it or not. So as strong farmers, as intelligent farmers, we need to look the challenge in the eye and say, how are we going to deal with this? Let's not shoot the messenger. Let's not deflect from the truth. Let's not pretend that somebody else's fault. It's not even our fault. We didn't do anything wrong, but we need to be honest and strong. I'm sure all of us teach that principle to our children. We need to be looking at each other and saying, let's take that principle on ourselves. These are harsh words, but they're true. It doesn't matter what we think. It matters what the consumers think. The beef industry, the people that are in the beef industry is a really, really small number of people compared to the whole population. And so whether we think beef is fantastic and love it and are passionate about it like I am, doesn't matter, because we're just such a small population of people. It matters what those people out there think. What we do also have to understand is that they don't care, and nor should we expect them to care. I'll say that again, they don't care, and nor should we expect them to care. It's a pretty busy space out there. The beef industry is talking to consumers, but so is lamb, and so is pork, and so is chicken, and so is broccoli, and so is wine and wheat and canola, and everybody is trying to talk to consumers. So we don't have some special little airspace to talk to consumers. So we need to give them true and honest messaging that convinces them that we've made a difference and that we care. And so sorry for all those who aren't involved in beef, but this is really focused on the beef industry alone. So when we talk about, you know, what we can do on our farms as far as sequestration, we have to understand really, really strongly that if you're a beef producer, you need all of those offsets to offset the methane that's coming out of your farm. You can't sell it. You'd be mad to sell it, because you've got to offset. Once we start acknowledging the true amount of methane that's coming out of our cattle, I think, you know, they're not going to let us get away from it. And when you look at the science and look what people are telling us, it's really scary how far beef sits out compared to our next food product, which is lamb. We're 50% worse than them. So we've got a real problem. We've got an image problem that we've got to work with. We've got an image problem in a whole lot of other areas. We don't need another one, but I'm sorry, it's here. So I guess the part that I'm talking about is we need to look on farm. We need to think about what we are doing as farmers, because that's where all the emissions are happening in the beef industry. It's the same for lamb. The majority of the emissions are happening on farm, and the majority of them are coming from our cows or from our ewes. And so that's the place that we have to go to have a significant effect on the amount of methane that is being associated with the product that we love and we sell to consumers. So just a bit of a different approach. I'm pretty passionate. I've been involved with the beef industry all my life. I've started out as a young fellow walking around the paddocks in bare feet, standing in cow pats to warm my feet on winter's mornings, and have been involved with it ever since. And so I certainly come from a passionate point of view of loving the beef industry. And I don't know if you can tell, but I have a great concern, and I want us to be brave now and not be trying to make up time in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time when it may be too late. So I'm sure there'll be some questions. Thank you again for asking me, and thanks, Peter.
Thanks, John. Definitely no doubt in your passion. And I know this is not something you've just recently been looking at, hence you made such a great presenter. It's been in your mindset now for a long period of time. So, before we move into our questions, part of the evening, as I mentioned, this is our last webinar for the foreseeable future. We really value your feedback, so please complete your survey on the way out. Now, a few people have flagged with me they're not sure about the handouts, and I can't seem to show you my toolbar in this program, but where you have polls, questions, etc., there's a tab there for handouts. So you need to select that tab. It should expose MLA Productivity and Profitability Web. It's a PDF. Click on that and you'll be able to access those handouts. All right, and as I said, these are the resources that MLA asked me to put up for the webinar. Now that file has quite a bit more than those links. Okay, and apologies for the inability to see my slides early on, but again, nothing was really missed there other than a snapshot of what those resources are. So John, we'll get to questions. Now, a bit like our last couple of webinars, guys, some of you have got some really narrow scope kind of questions that are technical. I'm not going to be able to put them up tonight. So an example of that is grazing perennial grasses, does it give a lower methane output than compared to legumes? Again, there's a whole range of variety of production factors that need to go into that question, and obviously different species. So we won't get to those kind of questions. A lot of comments here, John, thanking you for your passion, and also you've clarified made a good few points about production focus, and also how it relates to carbon. first question we've got here is on the no cow herd model. So if you were calming down a 2-year-old heifer, you'd have an animal emitting methane for 2 years before it produces a calf. So a fixed methane cost to the business. Aren't you better off keeping those that animal for subsequent calving to spread the cost of production and I guess referring to methane over that animal as opposed to buying in heifers?
The model. Can you hear me there?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the model is about, you know, when each group of heifers that comes through is inseminated with sex semen, and you have your next crop of calves, heifers coming through, which will then be inseminated. It would be, you know, only those females that don't get encalfed to the AI or the cover sire will only give you half heifers, and so you'll just have to, you know, the model says you just have to fill that last percentage of male calves with more females to come through. In that, you know, it's a good point. It's very expensive running heifers in that system, and a self-replacing herd does have a percentage of heifers already, and we all understand the cost of that, but it's, you know, it's just working on, you do the kilograms. You know, if you assume the animals are producing methane at a directly correlated rate to their intake, then you can just do a spreadsheet up of, you know, 2.5% of body weight over the years, and compare those two circumstances of I've done it myself, of the heifer no cow herd compared to a conventional herd, and it's extraordinary the difference in feed consumed, because those cows grow up to be 500, 600, 700 kilogram cows, and every year after that they're producing proportionately to their body weight that amount of methane.
Okay. Fiona, I hope that answered your question, given the length of your question and the last part was cut off, so hopefully that's done the job there. Now, question on your feeding system, John. How correlated is feeding efficiency for trough-fed animals with, you know, the pasture feeding scenario? So do you want to talk, John?
Yeah, so there's a different way it would be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you talk to your ration?
It would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be the most asked question that I've had over the last 25 years, or even the 5 years before that, when I was working with research at Trangie. Yeah, and it's a really, really hard one. It's a hard one for us to record exactly how much the animal is eating on grass. We can weigh them all right, we just can't work out. We're actually doing some work with Sydney University at the moment. So we've got methane recorders in our facility that's enabling us to record how much methane each animal is producing, at the same time as we're recording how much you know, they're eating and getting a feed conversion figure. So we've been doing that for 2 or 3 years with Sydney University. What we also have done is done 2 groups of 80 heifers. We've recorded them in the facility, both their intakes and methane output. And then we've taken those females out onto grass and recording how much methane they're producing on grass. Now, because of the strong relationship between the amount that they eat and the amount of methane they produce, if we can show that we've got similar rankings, if the best animals for methane out on grass are the best animals in the pens, that's going to tell us that, you know, the best feed converting animals in the facility are going to be the best feed converting animals out on grass. You know, it's a really, really hard one. The other way I answer that question quickly is saying there is, when we talk about feed efficiency, there's like 110 different genes that go to influence that one factor. So to think that the animals that are the most efficient in the facility eating what is a very basic diet that we feed them, it's just 75% whole oats, 25% lucerne with a bag of premix just to ensure they've got a balance of minerals. It's a very basic diet. It's not a high energy diet. It's not a feedlot diet. It's as simple as we can make it to try and get as close, but I know it's not perfect. But to think that 110 genes that influence feed efficiency are going to be a completely different 110 genes when they're out on grass, I'm confident that you know, we're picking up something, because it's just the digestion of protein, carbohydrates, minerals, fats in the rumen, and the way that rumen is reacting. We know there's a lot of factors of genetics in relation to rumen flora as well. So I'm confident that I'm doing the right thing and we're producing the right sort of animals. I see that in the animals that we're producing. We don't have time to go into that why, but I understand the concern that people have in that sense. And it's up to the seed stock industry to try and prove that to commercial producers if it's real.
Okay. John, you're asked here, we've heard a lot of warnings about producers entering contracts around carbon projects. Have you had any experience with that?
No, I haven't. I have no desire to. You know, we've got a big beef herd, 600 cows. Any of the carbon that I am creating on my farm, hopefully we've created a lot. I don't know how far we've got to go, how much more room we've got to move in that area. We will participate in some stuff to get some measurements, but I guess I'm doing all I can on the reducing emissions side, and any of the carbon that I can sequester, I know is doing a really, really important job. I know it adds to the profitability of my production system anyway, and I would never sell it to somebody else in fear that I'm going to need it. I'm going to need it in some form, whether to prove the shift that we've made, if we are allowed to do that. I'm not going to sell it to anyone else because I don't get it back, and so I need that to offset the emissions from my animals.
Excellent. All right, a good question here. Reducing time between lambing is an option for lamb producers, or breeding hoggets, you know, is another option to get lambs out of ewes. Do you see any options for these producers, John?
So there's a number of things I think we're talking about there. Is anything that we do that reduces the days alive, I think, is one part of it. So obviously days alive, if you can produce an animal and get it to a slaughter weight quicker, then that animal will have less emitting days, they call it, and hence have reduced emissions associated with it. As far as trying to increase the number of kilograms of lamb that you're producing per hectare, will also go to improving that figure. That, you know, one of the most important figures, and I think where it's going to sit as far as animal production, is the comparative measure that we're going to be assessed on is kilograms of CO2 per kilogram, CO2 equivalent per kilogram of product. So we need to shift that figure. That seems to be a universal figure that you compare, that they compare foodstuffs all around the world and then compare with foodstuffs. So that's the figure that we have to change. So certainly, if you can, you know, if you can produce more lambs per year out of your production system, from whichever angle you come up from that, it's, you know, improved fertility, improved growth rates, more lambs per year, twinning, triplets, all of those sort of things. We don't have cattle can't produce twins like sheep can. Another thing that's that makes us so inefficient. So we only get to produce half the number of progeny per year that you guys do. So, or in the sheep industry, which all goes to what we're talking about.
Okay. Now, John, you're getting a few technical questions, and I might jump on those grenades for you. The first one is more of a statement than a question, but I think it raises a really important point. So coming back to your point about owning the problem, someone here has made the comment, you know, how does beef stack up against sugar and other industries? And, you know, again, probably having more people on the planet could be more of an impact than cows. I guess, can you just talk to your point around right now, dairy or beef and dairy, not so much in Australia, are flagged as huge methane producers worldwide. And that's got everyone on the radar. So comparative to any other industry, it is an irrelevant question. It is what it is, and what we're outputting is a problem. So I'll probably steal most of your thunder. Is there anything else you want to add there, John?
All I can do is always rely on the science to look at the problem. And when we're talking about the discussion around emissions, then it's very, very clear how different foodstuffs are ranked and compared. Now, there's a whole lot of other factors around sustainability in a more general sense, that there's a lot of different agricultural industries and industries in general that have to take responsibility for what they've done in the past. You know, there's a big difference when we're talking about animal production and general farming or cropping. You know, there's lots of discussions about disturbing the soil and what that does. I have no desire to get into any of those conversations. All I want to do is work on the principle that if we all work towards reducing our emissions, we're taking responsibility for the problem, because we do have a problem. So if you want, you know, deflecting over to say it's really somebody else's problem rather than ours, I just don't think is a useful approach. And I'm going to use that energy in a positive way to try and attend to the problem, and not only my own problem, but try and extend that information out into the beef industry. So hopefully, you know, we've got a strong beef industry in 20 years time or 4 years time or 60 years time, because it's a bloody great industry and I love being in it. But do I think there's a risk it might not be here? Yeah, I do.
Okay, and on that note, we've got a question here. If half-life of methane is 12 years, why are we concerned about it, about that if our numbers are constant over time? Well, we've talked to that in previous presentations, and probably methane is going to be a big area of further research, and is a cause of concern, given that the effect of warming of that gas relative to CO2 is about 4 times what that is to carbon dioxide. So half-life of 12 years, 20 years, whatever science comes up with, it'll be what it is, but there's no doubt that methane is considerably worse off in terms of its effects for global warming. And that's consistent science.
Can I just add a little one there?
Yep.
Yeah, so the warming potential of methane is 270 times worse than CO2. It gets a warming potential of 27 because it only lasts for 10 years compared to 100 years. So the 270 is then divided by 10 to give us 27. So all of those calculations, you know, are put in there, and that's why it's got 27 times the warming potential than CO2. In this discussion, a lot of the time, people talk about 10 years as if it's nothing, and that's not the way that everybody else sees it. It's not a lot compared to 100 years, but it's still 10 years. It's up there for 10 years heating. So just to say it's not 100 years, it's only 10 years, like it doesn't matter, is missing the point, I think, in relation to how we're perceived by the people outside our industry.
So you make a good point there, and how it's treated in different models right now is varied as well, John. So we've had some lively debates, and again, whatever the program is in front of us, that's the best thing that we have available to us right now. And there's no doubting that the significance of methane comparative to, and I should say, we've only just focused on CO2 and methane in that series, but there are other gases at play as well, including nitrous oxide, NO2 as well. Now, a couple of quick questions to finish us off, John. How do you measure if a cow's too fat in, say, the second trimester? And do you report it? For example, if you had a great late summer rainfall in your pasture, are you saying don't let cows consume that pasture? John?
What I'm saying is that if they do, it's a waste of energy and a waste of feed. My approach is I'd much prefer to leave it on the ground than have it go down a cow's throat. Hard to measure what value it is staying on the ground, but I certainly know it does not create any profit for me going down a cow's throat. If she's already in a condition score 2, 2.5, 3, to push her up above that is costing you money because she's getting heavier, hence she's eating more. So it actually costs you money if she gets fatter. Don't think that she just eats it and it's lost. Forgetting about the methane part, just as far as, is that grass better to be on the ground or in your cow's gut? Forget about methane. Just think about profitability. You need to, it's a simple thing. There is no advantage in putting it down the cow's throat. In fact, it makes her eat more because she gets fatter and heavier, and she always eats in relation to her body weight.
Good point. All right, final question to finish out. Queensland DPI research is indicating that medium-sized animals are the best at feed efficiency. Do you have any comments on that, John?
Look, that depends. You can't make any statements like that because, there's, just like when you're talking about breeds, which is the most efficient breed, doesn't matter. There's as much variation within a breed as there is between breeds. So certainly been my experience over the last 25 years, I've been looking for some visual thing to tell me that which is the more efficient animal, so I don't have to go to all the costs of testing it. It's not there. There is no visual thing. I think they may be referring more to multi-trait moderate animals probably will work towards a more profitable system overall. But you need to look at that, from a multi-trait approach. So it's no use having moderate frame animals that you can't sell because their meat quality is no good, that their yield is no good, that their efficiency is no good, their growth is no good. The biggest trouble we have is people running to try and reduce mature cow size in a single trait selection. We all know what happened over the years, that all the breeds, Angus is going through it now, Hereford went through it, Shorthorns have been through it, this single trait selection for frame size. We end up with massive cattle. We have a massive car crash as far as fertility and the ability to fatten. Each breed does it. No one learns from the previous one. Angus is going through it at the moment. So if you go the other way and just say, I'm going to select on cow size and make them smaller and smaller and smaller, you will run into exactly the same sort of, or a car crash of the same size, because all of this stuff has to be done in a multi-trait approach and done slowly. So again, it's up to your seed stock producer to be doing that as well as he possibly can, he or she can. And yeah, just throwing your big cows out, I'm not sure is the answer.
Great answer to finish us on, John. Yeah, the danger of absolutism is clear in breeding or in this topic. So thank you for your time, John. We really appreciate your passion. Lots of people thank you online here as well. All thank you for tuning in through the course of this program. Please remember your survey on the way out. We value your input. Thanks again.
Thank you.